I can't one perfect, but there's ones that are good enough to me, and I think there's a little changes here and a little changes there, and it'd be pretty much what I wanted out of a distribution.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the things that Linux Power will be doing is rating different distributions as far as ease of use goes and installability. So it depends on, I've got quite a extensive background as far as computer science stuff goes. Probably 35 years, actually a bit more than 35 years plus. And Linux is, I've been using it for quite some time. But I've also used Windows, Mac, you name it. And actually of all of them, Linux is definitely my number one most favorite one. But it's all up to the user's taste. Actually, that's how I look at it. But as far as power users go, the Linux distribution stuff, basically Linux itself is really, really, really good. And
well, back to what is Linux again, because Linux itself isn't all the programs we're talking about. Linux is a kernel that runs all your hardware, but around that is all these tools that we're talking about, and all these tools are free. Whereas on other operating systems, such as Windows or Mac, you may have to pay for this functionality.
Yeah, that's true. There is a definite difference between commercial software and open source software. And actually, in a lot of cases, the open source software is better than the commercial side, which is really amazing. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that 10 or 12 years ago, but right now, a lot of it is.
That just shows you how the user base of Linux is changing, because it's just how things have changed, because now we have so many people and so much collaboration that we can get things done, and one person's idea will be pushed forward if they want it to, whereas in the closed source, if you want certain functionality, it may not be available, it may not be viable.
That's true. That's true. And, well, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that Linux does do, and there's a lot of people moving over to the Linux platform. I believe that, in fact, I'm not even sure how many user install base that we've got. I know that Linux is number 2. It's Windows, Linux, and Mac is number 3. User install base, I don't know. I wish I had that information. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back and discuss more stuff about Linux.
Today's broadcast is brought to you by newsworldwide.wordpress.com, your number one source for verified news and information from the web. That's newsworldwide.wordpress.com. And also by Linux Power. linuxpower.wordpress.com, the number one source for Linux information and distribution help. Okay, we're back, and let's go back into what kind of applications can we actually use in Linux? What is actually all out there? It's kind of like between all the different platforms. What can we do with actually the Linux?
Well, you got the standard stuff that you would see in your other operating systems, such as Firefox, Chromium, Opera. You've got VLC, so most people that generally just watch little videos here or there and do general browsing with Flash should be fairly comfortable in Linux. What other tools do you like using?
Well, I like using actually all of those. Opera is actually a closed source web browser, and it works fairly well, actually very well with Linux. And it just shows you that Linux is open source, but you actually can have commercial closed source applications for Linux too. So I mean, you're not limited from just an open source angle. You can use both.
Endless possibilities.
Right, exactly. And the neat thing about Linux is the fact that, well, let's talk about the cost of Linux. Well, how much does Linux cost? It's free.
It doesn't cost me anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, from a user perspective, it's really a fantastic OS. there's a lot of different things, like the music you heard, like the intro, was actually done on LMMS, which is the Linux Music sound system, or Linux Music system. And
let me take a look. Linux
Multimedia Studio. Yeah, there we go. You know what? I knew we'd get it right sometime. And you can actually, what it is it's kind of very similar to Fruity Loops. If you ever use that, it's actually a commercial application for Windows. And there's a photo editing program called GIMP.
I've used that extensively myself in creating posters and business cards and things like that. I've also used Photoshop on the Windows side, so I can say for most things it's very similar, and it's free software.
And I don't know, how do you compare Photoshop with GIMP? I mean, is it almost identical, or is it easier to use? I don't know.
Well, in terms of that, you have to look at what the platforms are made for. Photoshop is made for Mac and Windows. It's got that market in mind, whereas GIMP may be more flexible, but you really got to read the help files and learn how to use it. It may not be as user-friendly as something like MS Paint, but that's not Photoshop comparison either. But it's a separate layout, because the different tools have their own spot and they can go behind and stuff like that. Whereas with Photoshop, everything's in one window and you have to fit it in that window. You can't have things, say, across multiple desktops or multiple monitors even, whereas in Linux and GIMP you could, and you could take advantage of that.
Right, and there's other things like OpenOffice, which is pretty much just like Microsoft Office. Actually, a little bit easier to use, I think, in some ways.
LibreWriter is pretty much the same. There's been some debate against OpenOffice and LibreOffice.
Actually, yeah, it's the same program. The let's see, the OpenOffice actually has been stopped. Is that right? They're no longer.
I'm not sure. I just know when I came back to Linux this time from my bout of playing PC games, the new office to use was LibreWriter, but I'm not sure exactly why.
Yeah, it's I think if they closed down, I think it was like Susie bought it. I don't know. One of the distros bought out. I'm not exactly sure the whole rundown on that. But basically, it's the same stuff. And we've got KDE is a graphical user interface, which has a lot of different software applications for it. One of them is KContacts, which is actually it's a personal information manager, basically. And you've got everything from a scheduling program to RSS feeds you can download into RSS feeds into it.
Lists, calendars, contacts. You can take notes in it. You can have it help you start a book, different notebooks for keeping track of your information and things like that. The application of it, there's lots of application there. It can also work as an email client.
Yeah, exactly. And notes and you name it. It's got tons of stuff. More than what a lot of people even use, that's fine. It's great to have the options there. And there's also music players, like Amrock is out there, which is actually, it's a player. There's also a couple of other programs which will play different...
If you've ever used Winamp, you'll be comfortable with a program called XMMS, and you can make it set up to look pretty much exactly like Winamp does. If you were ever a hardcore Winamp user and you prefer that as your audio player, there's something familiar for you there.
Right, and then there's also Audacity is another one, which is this program right now that you're listening to, which is recorded in Audacity. Also another program which is KDE Live, which is a video editing studio, and it pretty much does everything you could think of for video editing. Learning curve is a little high, but it's by golly, it'll do everything you can think of. And that program there is very close to Sony Vegas Pro, if anybody's ever used that. It's
so yeah, you get a lot of professional quality tools that you would expect to go and pay $500-$600 or more at a store for free when you use Linux.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And all this software is available through your basically it's your software installer, like
your software repository.
Yeah.
Will have a front end such as Synaptic or RPM Drake or Yum, and those particular package managers will connect to servers